Welcome back to the movie review roundup. I saw a few more films that I have some opinions on, and here they are in absolutely no particular order. Written and directed by Patrick Picard, his theatrical debut, The Bloodhound is a not-so-subtle adaptation of Edgar Allan Poe's 1839 story, The Fall of the House of Usher. A young man named Francis, at the behest of his childhood friend, arrives at his affluent property, home to him and his twin sister who spends most of the film spirited away in her bedroom, only making the most minimalist of appearances. I saw inspiration for Picard's film through the eyes of Yorgos Lanthimos, a personal favorite director of mine, but it's not so much the dialogue itself, but as the delivery of it instead. The conversations between Francis and Jean-Paul, also known as JP, are incredibly awkward, and they have this unusual form of stiffness, this rigidity. If you've seen Killing of a Sacred Deer or The Lobster, two films I highly recommend, then you'll understand what I'm referencing. The greatest amount of praise I can give The Bloodhound is its stylistic choices. The framing and cinematography are exceptionally well done. The decision to rely on a largely static and unmoving frame helps create this interesting juxtaposition between the awkward characters and the beautiful world that they inhabit together. It's almost like they don't really belong together. I believe Picard wanted the two main leads, Francis and JP, to deliver their lines as amateurish as possible. No other character in the small roster of faces we see in the film act like these two men. I feel like this is a very subtle clue into their personalities, neither of which has seen each other in 10 years or so. And while they seemingly begin to pick up where they left off as friends, they have this unnatural way of speaking with each other. It's almost as if they're unsure of the other's intentions and whether or not they can trust the man that they've grown into. A lot of viewers are probably going to call this style over substance and boring, but I actually quite liked it. I'm hard pressed to find a friend I personally know that I could recommend this movie to, because it feels like it's a movie that was made specifically for me, and at the end of the day, that's all the film needs to be. Made for me. I was actually really surprised by this film, considering the director Daniel Farran's previous work in the industry, with being credited for writing Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers, arguably the worst entry into the franchise, and directing two separate dogshit films, The Murder of Nicole Brown Simpson and The Haunting of Sharon Tate. Seriously, it's a train wreck, both of them abysmal. Now, despite this opening paragraph, Crystal Lake Memories was a really well put together documentary. It chronicles the entire Friday the 13th franchise, every film, the Freddy vs. Jason crossover film, the short-lived TV series of the same name. Every aspect of each film is talked about in great detail, which is really cool. And it's clocking in just shy of 7 hours. Despite this, there's not a single boring moment in the entire film. Each entry focuses on budget, casting interactions, trivia facts, and how it was made, what problems came up, how censors got involved, critics, everything. It shines a light on so many little details you'd never know. If you weren't a fan of the movies, it might not be something for you, but even then, it's actually really cool to see how these movies got made, what direction they were taking them in, what kind of things happened to shape what they became. The pacing works really well. They focus on each film for about 25 to 30 minutes or so. So you don't actually have to watch the entire thing in a single sitting. It's almost 7 hours, for Christ's sake. So you can just, watch the first 3 and then pause, come back later. But yeah, it's really well done. A shocking amount of cast and crew, from both lead actors to even tiny bit parts appear in the documentary to talk about their experiences. Like, oh, it's my first time in this movie. They get back so many different characters from the films into the documentary. It's impressive, to say the least. But yeah, I could extol as long as possible about this movie, but seriously, if you're a fan of the franchise and you haven't seen it, you'll really dig it. And even if you don't like the franchise, it's really cool to see how these movies were put together and just, the obstacles that they came across and support from fans. I liked it. I thought it was pretty cool. I personally think films that take place over a computer screen are nothing more than a gimmick, kind of like 3D. There are still a few examples that rise above the traditional mediocre reviews that come out with The Territory, and I suppose Host is one of the better flicks. A saving grace for Host is its minuscule runtime of only 56 minutes. It just feels like a longer episode from a television show. Making it any longer than that, it would have just dragged on. It was short and sweet, and it did exactly what it's supposed to do in that time frame. So I appreciate the filmmakers not going any longer than it needed to be. After the opening 15 minutes, the film ramps up the tension, and I'll admit there were a handful of moments that caught me off guard. I actually was like, well, that's kind of creepy. And there's a lot of little early moments that start in the film that are very quiet. It lowers the audio down to very quiet, and you're expecting a giant jump scare, and nothing happens. So there's a lot of teasing that goes on, which is great for building atmosphere. However, the end of the movie does devolve into loud thumping, banging, screaming, crashing, crying, yada, yada, yada. I don't really have too much to say. I did want to talk about this one because I thought it was pretty okay, pretty good. When you compare it to stuff like Unfriended or Unfriended 2 or I don't know, I'm drawing a blank. Host is easily one of the ones that I could recommend because, one, it's a short runtime and it's not too bad. There's also a lot of little Easter eggs apparently hidden throughout the film that I didn't catch on my first watch, so maybe it's something that I'll view again. Maybe I'll watch it with some friends and to see their reactions, but it would be worthwhile to check out what I had missed. But honestly, I thought it was okay. Wasn't too bad. Would watch it again.